She came to sell the old house, but instead of keys, she found a plan for revenge, written in her aunt's hand. The guest room. The lawyer looked as if he didn't care. He sat behind a glass desk, flipping through folders without looking up. Only when he said the name did his voice waver slightly. "Miss Wilson?" She nodded. He handed her a thick brown envelope. No return address, just a handwritten note. To be opened personally, do not alter. As stated in the will, you are the sole inheritor of Miss Amelia Gray's estate, he said as if he'd rehearsed it 1,000 times. The house, the land, and the contents of the safe. Everything is in order. I don't know any Amelia Gray, she said, holding the envelope as if it might burn. I don't have any aunts. Apparently you did. He offered no explanation, signed the papers, filed the copies, and told her the keys had been left with the agency on Hill Street. She could begin the sale immediately or go see the property. As a child, she was often told there was no one else in the family. A simple, happy family, no extra stories. Now it sounded different, like something thoroughly scrubbed clean. On the way back, she opened the envelope. Inside, a single sheet. I am not asking for forgiveness. I'm only asking you to learn everything before you erase my name. Nothing else. No photo, no explanation, just a name carved like a scar at the end of the line, and a signature written as if it were trying to erase something. She didn't know who this woman was, why she'd been left everything, why no one in the family had ever mentioned her. Her father had died a year ago. Her mother always said he was an only child. We don't have any sisters, no one does. Now it seemed like a lie, or a truth, carefully redacted. At the very bottom of the letter, in the corner, almost illegible, was a note. And if you're reading this, it means he could no longer lie to you. She placed the letter back and looked out the window. Leaves fell from the trees, and something in the way they dropped felt like a signal. An hour later, she turned off the highway. A day later, she stood before the crooked porch. And only a week later did she realize she hadn't inherited a house. She had inherited someone else's pain, and it had finally found someone to carry it forward. The house stood at the end of an abandoned street, as if it had chosen solitude. The facade was sun-bleached, the paint flaking off, and the mailbox hung crooked, as though it had long since given up. On the rusted gate, someone had attached a faded sign, "Do not disturb." She stopped a few steps short and suddenly felt like an intruder, as if someone were watching. In her family home, there were no outbursts, no fights, only proper dinners and polite smiles. Yet she'd always sensed something left unsaid. She felt the same now, as if the house held a conversation that had never taken place. The house wasn't large. 2 floors, narrow windows, a peeling veranda. She imagined the woman who had lived here, the woman no one had mentioned. Amelia, an aunt whose name sounded like a mistake. When she turned the key, the lock resisted, as if reluctant. The door creaked, and for a moment the air inside felt heavier than outside. The smell of old books, dust, and something else. Familiar, yet forgotten. The house was not empty. The walls were covered with frameless pictures, as if someone had torn pages from albums and pinned them up without ceremony. In the hallway stood an armchair draped with a knitted throw, and on the floor, a single house slipper. She walked down the hallway, trying not to make a sound, though she knew no one was there. Every room felt strangely intact, the belongings in place, but with the sense that the owner had left and never returned. In the kitchen lay a stack of unopened letters, all addressed to Amelia. Only in one room, beneath the window, she saw a second sign, one that couldn't be read from the street. In chalk, someone had written, "I know you wanted to forget me, but I remember you." A chill ran through her. She stepped out and looked again at the house's facade. The "Do Not Disturb" sign now read differently, not as a request to neighbors, but as a warning. But it was too late. The door behind her slammed shut from the draft. The basement was low, with concrete steps and a dim bulb flickering, as if uncertain whether it should illuminate the place. She descended slowly, clutching the rail, chipped and damp to the touch. The smell was different, a mix of mildew, old paper, and something fragile, as if the air still remembered someone crying here. To the left of the stairs was an old table buried in boxes. She moved the top one. It held empty pill bottles and scraps of notes. Beneath it, a bundle of letters tied with twine. On the top was an envelope labeled, "For her, when she's ready." The handwriting was straight, careful, firm, the kind used by those who've stayed silent too long. She sat on a step and opened the letter. The paper was yellowed, as though it had lived here longer than the house itself. "You don't know me, but I know who you are. You're the daughter of the one who turned away from me." This isn't blame. It's just fact. My name was Amelia, but in the family, that name was scrubbed away like a stain. I was the youngest, the strange one, the sickly one. They said I frightened guests. Then, that I was better left unspoken of. I don't know how to seek revenge, but I do know how to remember, and memory can scrape too. You are the last person who can call me by name. There was no signature, only a short note in the margin. If you're reading this, it means you're already inside. She looked up. The walls of the basement were chalked with circles. Inside each, a name, her father's, her grandmother's, and her own, written later than the others, in a trembling line, as if the hand had hesitated. Her heart began to pound. Amelia hadn't just lived here. She had been preparing, and it seemed waiting for her. They were in a shoebox wrapped in cloth that smelled of vinegar and thyme. The covers were cracked, the pages brittle, yet the ink had not faded. There were 7 notebooks in all, each dated with a brief title on the front page: Winter, no answers; Spring, no letters; Summer, without them. She picked the first one and opened it. The handwriting was the same, firm, restrained, but the entries were dense, saturated with detail. I heard Mom say once, "She has no future." That's when I started writing a diary, so that at least I'd have a past. The pages brimmed with observations, precise, almost clinical. Who sat where at dinner, who glanced with what expression, who pretended not to hear. Details no one usually noticed. But here they were preserved, like evidence. Later the entries turned into lists. I made an inventory, not for revenge, for order. If no one remembers, I will write it down. Tucked between the pages of one notebook was a newspaper clipping, an article about a charity gala organized by her father. In the photo, her father, her mother, and herself as a child. The headline read, "The Gray Family Unites Hearts." In the margin, a dry note, except one. She closed the diary and looked at the rest. The feeling of unease shifted toward shame. Amelia hadn't been strange. She had been watching, recording, and keeping her fragile chronicle in silence. Later, trying to shake off the weight, she carried the notebooks into the backyard and struck a match. The paper crackled, but didn't burn. Even fire backed away, as if the pages were no longer its to take. She gathered them back up and returned inside, placed them in a drawer, unable to store them farther. Sometimes you don't need to understand completely, it's enough not to look away. She found it by accident, behind the back wall of a cabinet, where a board had been cut out and pressed back in, as if a hiding place had been hastily made. Behind it lay a rolled sheet of thick paper. At first glance, just a floor plan. But when she spread it on the floor, she realized this wasn't a blueprint. It was a chart of feelings. Each room was marked in color. The kitchen, gray with the note, "Scent of Silence." The living room, black with "Where no one said goodbye." Her own bedroom, dashed, "Do not enter, pain is fresh." There were arrows, too, from the door to the armchair, from the chair to the phone, from the phone to the stairs. Each point linked to a word. Wait, listen, don't believe. The longer she looked, the more she saw. This wasn't a map of a house. It was a map of loneliness, a reflection of how space becomes memory when you're denied words. In the lower left corner, almost erased, it read, "Family isn't only those who love you. It's also those who pretend not to see." and beneath it, another line in a more fluid hand, as if written in a rush. I watched her through the glass. She smiled at me once. That's when I knew I still exist. She felt something rise in her throat, thick, unshaped. It wasn't anger. It wasn't pity. It was silence, catching on a name. She stood and followed the arrows, stopped at the window where Amelia, according to her diary, had once spent hours watching the neighbors. Then, to the armchair in the hall. Then, down to the basement where the chalk circles had grown faint. The house had gone quiet, but in that quiet there was movement now, as if the walls were waiting for someone to walk the path again. Not as a witness, but as evidence. She remembered how her father used to say, "We have no secrets. We're a normal family." Now she understood. Normalcy is often just a form of disappearance. The map in her hands trembled, and in that moment she realized Amelia hadn't tried to seek revenge. She tried to leave a route so someone would reach the end. The photo was hidden behind glass, turned to face the wall. A typical family shot. Christmas tree, parents in holiday clothes, herself around 7, a ribbon in her hair. But in the corner, nearly lost in shadow, stood a girl. In a slightly wrinkled dress, her hands behind her back. She wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking at them. And the expression on her face, not unfamiliar. She flipped the photo over. On the back, in faded ink, I was there too. After that, everything shifted, each memory like a reel with missing frames. Then one surfaced, hazy, layered with a voice not her own. New Year's Eve. She's holding a box of chocolates, approaching a woman by the window, hesitantly offering one. The woman smiles, but then her father sharply grabs her wrist. Not for her. She hadn't understood back then. She'd just frozen, like she'd been taught. Smile. Don't ask. Don't make a scene. Later, the moment vanished from memory, but her hand still remembered. The gesture interrupted. Now she knew that had been Amelia. Not vanished, erased. Later, she found another envelope. Inside a box of Christmas decorations. Inside, a short letter, written by hand but calmer, as if after all storms. If you're reading this, it means you stayed. I never asked to be understood, only not to be forgotten. I don't need statues. I only need a place in someone's memory. If you let me in, I'll stop rattling in the walls. She reread the lines over and over. The word "let" rang loudest. It wasn't just about the house. It was about herself. About letting in pain that wasn't hers, but was now partly hers too. Because now she understood. When you stay silent with others, you too become part of forgetting. In the morning, she opened the window in that same room where the chalk had read, I remember you, and whispered into the emptiness. I remember you. The house creaked, not threateningly, but like a sigh. She didn't sell the house. The real estate agent called twice, then stopped. The neighbors still avoided the property, and no one asked who now lived behind the gate with the faded nameplate. The house stood quieter, but not dead. The drafts no longer slammed the doors. The porch boards didn't groan underfoot, as if the walls had settled, sensing they were being listened to. She cleaned the guest room first, brushed away the dust carefully, as if from the face of someone asleep. She repainted the walls, not in the light tone she had first considered, but in a deep blue, like the ink in Amelia's notebooks. The bed remained the same. Above it, a shelf of books, with the journals now placed at the center. Not hidden, not burned. Simply there, like testimonies. On the windowsill sat a cracked mug with a cactus growing inside. She didn't know who had left the plant, but somehow it had taken root. Sometimes in the mornings, she would enter the room for no reason at all. Sit in the chair and read a random page from the journal. Not for meaning, but for presence. There were no longer any words on the door, neither "Do not disturb" nor "I remember." Now a small wooden plaque hung there, the letters burned into it. Guest room. Sometimes she felt Amelia was still here, not as a ghost, but in the kind of silence one doesn't want to interrupt, in the sense that something had finally been called by its true name. She didn't know if she had forgiven, but she knew she remembered. And every time she passed the mirror in the hallway, she caught a glimpse of a reflection where there were two of them. She didn't flinch. She simply nodded. Sometimes the quietest presence leaves the loudest trace.